One of the top things that we get asked about over and over again is what are the dynamics, what are the process, what are the benefits, and ultimately the pros and cons of owning a vacation rental at the Oregon coast. In this video, we're going to talk about all of that. And there are a lot of things to consider and a lot of different circumstances that people might be in terms of, how much equity they have, how much money they're putting down, are they buying cash? Is the goal to make rental income with an investment property, have a property that you can kind of use at your disposal, but make a little income to pay for it on the side, or just have a house that you can go to and not really worry about, the tax implications or the income potential. So in this video, we're going to talk about, again, the pros and cons of owning a vacation rental at the Oregon coast. And if it's something you're considering, stay tuned to learn everything you need to know about the process. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Paul Clem with the Home Team Brokers coming to you from the Oregon coast. And if this so happens to be your first time to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell to make sure that you are notified every time we drop a new video. And we get people asking us all the time, what does it take to buy a vacation rental at the Oregon coast? Is it worth it? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about some of what the numbers look like, what the process might look like, what you want to evaluate in purchasing a vacation rental or vacation home at the Oregon coast, and ultimately break down some of the things that you need to know if it is something that you're considering. It's something we get asked about all the time. And ultimately, this will probably not be the first video on this topic. And if we've missed anything on this topic, definitely let us know in the comments. This video is, not meant to be too arduous, in terms of throwing too much information at you. We don't want to get too far in the weeds on, some of the numbers and things like that. But ultimately, we want to talk about, okay, what are the things that you need to evaluate? What are you coming with in terms of cash to this transaction? Are you paying all cash? Are you making kind of a minimum possible down payment? What do loans look like? Well, we're going to talk about all of that. And if you're considering buying a vacation rental, a second home, vacation home at the Oregon coast, make sure to give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or even schedule a Zoom call in the description below. However you decide to get a hold of us, we have your back when it comes to moving to the Oregon coast. So vacation rentals, are they worth it? Ultimately, it's going to come down to what makes the most sense for you, you and your family, you and your partner, your spouse, your business partner, whatever the circumstance or dynamics are of this potential transaction for you. We're going to talk about the top things to consider when purchasing a vacation home or vacation rental income property at the Oregon coast. And looking at this from kind of a broad brush perspective, as far as, the income or equity gains potential, there's really two primary ways that you can make money, from a vacation rental at the Oregon coast. Even if you don't rent it out at all, there's still ways that over time you can earn money if you turn around and sell that property at some point in the future. So the two primary ways that you can make money from a vacation rental at the Oregon coast are cash flow and equity, or a combination of those things potentially. But if you are coming into this with some sort of a business plan to really kind of, dial in the numbers in terms of what pencils for you to own a property at the Oregon coast and rent it enough to make enough income to not just pay for the property, but also see some cash flow on a monthly basis, that's certainly going to be an element of what we discuss in this video today. The other end of that is just the equity gains overall. So even if you never rented out your property, that property inevitably is going to gain value in terms of equity over time. this really kind of depends on what the primary goal is that you're going into this process with. Do you have a business plan? Do you have the expectation to have some kind of cash flow, or even find a little bit of a break-even point where, you know, the property is essentially paying for itself after you financed it? Or are you coming in with cash and you just want to buy a beach house? Typically, there's not going to be too much middle ground there. You know, either you are looking to, you know, earn substantial rental income, again, either enough to pay for the property and use it a little bit throughout the year, or, you know, potentially to rent it as much as possible and get that cash flow going. Or, you know, you're coming into this with substantial cash or all cash in terms of your purchase, and you're not really worried about the cost necessarily. You just want to have a beach house to enjoy. Whichever end of the spectrum you fall on, there's going to be a lot of things to consider, and a lot of things that are, you know, maybe unknown if you haven't ever bought a second home or vacation home. And those are the things that we're going to discuss in this video today. But before we get into that, I want to talk about if you are financing a vacation rental or vacation home at the Oregon coast, or really anywhere in the country, the terms on a conventional loan are going to be a little bit different. Now, I'm not a licensed mortgage professional, so we just want to talk about some of the bullet points here. There's a lot more nuance and a lot of things that go into this in terms of considerations. But basically, you're going to be required to put down a higher down payment. At least 20%, probably closer to 25 or 30% would be more favorable to you as far as the interest rate that you can get. But if you are getting a conventional loan or even potentially a jumbo loan for this type of property, you're going to have a higher interest rate. And, you know, that could be anywhere upwards to 4 or 5%, 6 or 7%, depending on the size of the loan, and even potentially the income potential of the property itself. So these are all things that you would work out with your lender. But, you know, this isn't something where you can come in with, you know, a 5%, 10% down and expect to, you know, get the kind of the standard interest rates that you would get on a primary residence. So, you know, other factors play into that too: your credit score, the purchase price, and again, the income potential for the property if you are going that route. So just know that right out of the gate, if you're not paying all cash for a property, there's going to be kind of stricter requirements, more cash down required, higher interest rates, and all of those things are kind of taken into consideration and evaluated and ultimately determined by your credit score, the income potential, the loan amount, and ultimately the purchase price of the property as well. So let's pretend kind of in a first scenario that you want to buy an income property, or rather an investment property, in the form of a vacation rental at the Oregon coast. There's going to be some primary factors to take into consideration when you start looking at the numbers. This is a bit of a broad brush overview, but there's always going to be some kind of standard metrics to be evaluating. And first and foremost is going to be the occupancy rate. Now, the occupancy rate is the percentage ultimately of days throughout the course of a year that a town or region has vacation rentals occupied. So there's going to be a big range within that in terms of, you know, the type and desirability of the property, obviously. So something that is more desirable or in higher demand is probably has a higher occupancy rate overall than something that isn't as desirable. And that could be based on size, that could be based on the location, that could be based on a number of factors that people are evaluating. But there are some, you know, kind of intuitive criteria that you can bring into evaluating that. You know, it's not that difficult to understand what people may or may not be looking for when they're renting a beach house at the Oregon coast. And so take those things into consideration. There's definitely going to be a little bit of guesswork there, but again, it's pretty intuitive as far as what people typically, you know, are looking for and what people are generally going to be booking. But overall, you can pretty easily find the occupancy rate of a particular town, and that in and of itself can give you a pretty good idea of how often or how much you would be able to rent a property throughout the course of a year. And then the other piece of that equation is the average daily rate. So again, going to be a big range as far as the size of a property, desirability, things like that. But you can look at the average daily rate of a particular town or area, and then multiply that by the occupancy rate, and you can start to get an idea of what the income potential may be. If it's a 6-bedroom house that sleeps 20 people, you're going to be able to charge a lot more than a 1-bedroom house that sleeps 3 people, and kind of, evaluating anywhere in between. So you should have a pretty good idea once, you can look at the average daily rate and then factor in the size of the property and different other factors that go into, whether or not it's a property that would rent for, a percentage below that average daily rate or a percentage above that average daily rate, and so forth. So if we're just looking at the potential of a property without getting too far in the weeds, just those numbers alone, those stats alone can start to give you a pretty good idea and start to paint a picture about what the potential may be if you are looking to potentially buy a vacation rental that is producing a positive cash flow. And so with that said, we have some of the, kind of the primary factors as far as, what metrics and statistics to look at, the average daily rate and the occupancy rate for a particular town. The other part of that is going to be evaluating, more of the intangible stuff. And kind of, whether or not a certain property more or less passed the sniff test. Is it a place that, you feel is desirable based on a number of different factors and criteria, maybe proximity to the beach, proximity to town, how updated it is, kind of the amenities and features of a particular property. Depending on the town, the type of property, there's a list of criteria that you could easily come up with where you're kind of evaluating, again, what the demand might be for that particular property. So we're looking at kind of a macro level as far as kind of the averages and things like that for a particular area. But in terms of evaluating an individual property, we can get a lot more detailed with, okay, where does this property stand? Where does it fall? Kind of within the averages of a specific town or area. And then so once we've done, more or less a quick evaluation and the numbers look good, at least on paper, then you can start looking at, okay, and factoring in, what are my costs? And, this is something that can bring up a lot of unknowns. If you haven't purchased a second home, and you haven't really started to do the research and taken the steps as far as learning kind of what are the implications as far as, the impact of cost for a second home or vacation rental, and does that either disqualify you or provide a big enough deterrent to potentially not take that next step in buying a home at the Oregon coast. So one of the big considerations is a fee or cost for property management. Or having a vacation rental company kind of manage your rental. And so if you are looking more on kind of the cash flow gains month to month, year over year on an investment property at the Oregon coast, it might be more efficient from a time management perspective to have somebody manage the business aspect of this for you. And really where a bulk of that time would be expended is on the just the property management altogether. And property management fees could be anywhere from 5 to 10% to 20%, even more, up to 30-35%, depending on probably the level of service and the level of kind of traffic or bookings that a particular vacation rental company or property management company gets. If a company is coming in and saying, look, we get X amount of traffic to our website, we manage X amount of properties, this is what you can expect if you list your property with us, they probably are going to be charging a higher rate if they're guaranteeing more in terms of bookings. Also, if they're doing more as far as cleaning and maintenance and upkeep, things like that, that would be otherwise taking up your time, they're probably charging a little bit more as well. So depending on what level of service you want, if you want somebody to manage it at all, you could be spending quite a bit of money on just property management alone, which ultimately eats into your bottom line, takes away from that income potential. But very common, something that a lot of people do. In fact, I think a lot of people, maybe go into this process at first thinking that they can manage it themselves. And especially if they are getting a lot of rentals and they're seeing some relative success, they're finding, this is taking up a lot of their time, energy, effort, and resources, and then look for a property management company to hand the reins over to. So probably something that you should factor in right out of the gate, whether it's something that you do initially, or it's something that eventually, you do listing a property with a property management company. Another thing to take into consideration when you're crunching these numbers are the utility costs. So, water, sewer, gas, garbage, cable, electricity, all of kind of the standard utility costs that you would associate with any home, of course, are going to come into play here. And there's going to be different rates based on the property itself and based on the town or the county that it's in. So those are numbers that you want to pull up and research as you're doing this calculation and kind of, trying to get a better understanding for, what the income potential is for a given property. Another big thing that, especially when we look at the Oregon coast specifically, is maintenance costs. There's always going to be some incidental damages, or larger damages, that take place when you're renting a property at a relatively high frequency to, just kind of more or less anybody and everybody, whether that be holes in the wall or broken furniture, things that just kind of happen invariably, and that you can count on happening if you're renting a property to a high frequency of people. But at the Oregon coast, and we actually did a video, if you want to look at this, here's a link to it, on kind of the potential damages, maintenance costs for an Oregon coast property. Because the proximity to the ocean, there's a lot of salt in the air, it's very moist, that can cause water damage, corrosion on the exterior, and even inside the house in your HVAC system. And there's a lot of steps throughout the year and kind of preventative maintenance that need to take place owning an Oregon coast home. And so, this might be something that, whether you're going out and doing it yourself, maybe a vacation rental company or property management company takes care of some of these things. Either way, the potential for large-scale damage and therefore large-scale repairs or replacements are definitely there. So factoring in a cushion on an annual basis for these types of costs is definitely something that you would want to do, to guard against being hit with, these enormous repair or replacement bills. So if we're going down the line evaluating the costs of owning a vacation home or vacation rental, just know that rental income is taxed as ordinary income. So whatever tax bracket you fall in, you can count on the rental income from a property being taxed at the same rate. And so unless you're renting your property for less than 15 days a year, which if that's the case, you actually don't have to report anything. So that's kind of nice, but pretty nominal in the grand scheme of things. If you're looking at renting your property, 80% of the year, 300 days a year, that rental income is going to be taxed at the same rate as your ordinary income. And so, as you're evaluating your bottom line after these maintenance costs, utility costs, property management costs, you have to take away the taxes as well to kind of factor in what that cash flow actually looks like as far as what you're netting for your rental property. All right, so the next piece, kind of in that same breath, is talking about the tax implications and classifications for a vacation home. So a vacation home is considered a residence if you are using it for either more than 14 days out of the year or more than 10% of the total days rented. So if we look at the latter piece of that example, if you're renting for 300 days out of the year, you can actually use the property for up to 30 days out of the year and still fall within that 10% threshold. So, you're kind of looking at a high volume on that side, if you're taking that percentage, or you might be kind of on the lower volume if you're just looking at that 14-day rate. If you're using the property for more than 14 days, again, it could be considered a residence, and therefore, if it is considered a residence, some of the operating costs, when we look at this from a business perspective, like utilities and repairs and things like that, wouldn't be deductible. So if you're coming at this, kind of more purely from the side of the spectrum where you're looking to generate cash flow, but you're also using the property for more than 10% of the days that you've rented it, or for more than 14 days out of the year, that takes a big piece out of the equation in terms of what's actually deductible for you. So that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily have, exposure to, unless they've gotten maybe a little bit further in the process. And again, if you are looking at this more from an income property perspective, that's going to be a big factor and a big consideration. Now, again, if you're paying all cash or taking out a very small loan, and you're not really looking to produce income for a vacation rental property, but this is truly just a second home or vacation home for you, the deductibility piece, still comes into play, but may not matter as much, because ultimately, just having the second home is worth it, in terms of the enjoyment and being able to use it whenever you want. Now, if you're somewhere more in the middle of that spectrum, you're just going to be dividing the deductibility of the property between your personal use and the rental use of the property. So there is still potential for some deductibility with some of the operating costs on the rental side. And if we're looking at things like mortgage interests, taxes, those things can still be deductible. But you just have to divide it between the personal use of the property and the days that you've rented it out at a standard fair rate, according to the IRS, which is a little bit ambiguous, but it is pretty easy to produce kind of what a standard fair rate would be. So you can't really kind of skirt around, some of these requirements by renting it out X amount of days at a substantially reduced rate to like friends and family, for example. So, you need to kind of play ball here to kind of fall in line and be compliant with these requirements. The days that you're renting a property, do need to be rented at a standard daily rate based on area averages. So taking a bit of a step back here, that's a lot of information and a lot of things to consider. First and foremost, you want to have a clear understanding of what your intention is for the property and what you're coming into the transaction with in terms of cash. So again, if you are looking to finance a property and you're paying 25-30% down, you're going to be looking at a loan that has stricter requirements and requires a higher interest rate and potentially more down payment than a standard conventional loan. This is where you can get into breaking down the income potential for a property and what's really going to make sense as far as you actually being able to use the property if that's the case. If you just want to buy a second home or vacation home for you and your family, and you're paying all cash or something close to it, some of those considerations don't really matter. Some of the tax classifications and the implications in terms of what's deductible are things that you want to take into consideration. So think about what the intention is, how you want to use the property and how much, and what's the position you're going to have in terms of cash or equity right out of the gate with a property that you're going to be purchasing. Now, if we are looking at the income potential, even if it's something that you want to do down the road, look at the standard occupancy rate for a town, look at the average daily rate, and then evaluate the property as a standalone, as far as the potential demand and desirability for that property. Does it fall in line with the average daily rate? Does it fall in line with the standard occupancy rate? Is it going to be a little bit below? Is it going to be a little bit above? Look at those numbers over the course of a year And then once you have a number that you feel comfortable with, start looking at the costs and factoring in the cost. Are you going to have a vacation rental company manage this full time? What level of service are they providing? And ultimately, what is their fee? What are the utility costs? What are the maintenance costs? And then, what are you going to be taxed on your income, your rental income for this property? And then you can start painting a clearer picture of what your net income on a monthly and yearly basis will be for a property that you've purchased. And if at that point everything makes sense, start looking at what you would need to do as far as how much you would need to rent the property to allow you to maybe turn a little bit of an income, or at least have the property kind of pay for itself and you're just gaining the equity. And how much would that allow you to actually use the property yourself for personal enjoyment? There's a lot of information via the IRS that you can look at, and we can always connect and talk more about those numbers over the phone or over a Zoom call and kind of dig into those numbers and classifications more specifically. There's also a really cool tool called AirDNA that will give you numbers on the vacation rental income potential, even down to the specific address. So you can plug in an address of a property that you're looking at. You can plug it into this tool, and you can look at the income potential based on a number of different data points that this tool is bringing in to evaluate that. And even that alone eliminates kind of some of that manual work that you might need to do. It's called AirDNA. It is a subscription service. So if you are seriously considering purchasing a vacation rental at the Oregon coast, it might be worth it to pay, I think it's like $20 a month or something like that, to kind of, further evaluate these properties that you're considering based on the income potential. And again, as always, if you are thinking about buying a vacation home or second home at the Oregon coast, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, schedule a Zoom call in the description below. However you decide to get a hold of us, we have your back when it comes to moving to the Oregon coast. And until next time, happy house hunting.